I want to talk about the elections briefly because the president gave a shout out to Judicial Watch, actually two of them, one on Maria Bartiromo's show yesterday, and also during a press conference about our work in California, where we settled a election rolls cleanup case with the LA County and the state of California that requires LA County to remove up to 1.6 million names from the rolls. And the president highlights that work as support for his concern about mail-in ballots, which is, I think, a concern well worth, that is well placed, I should say, well founded. Did you know, by the way, and this is the number that we ought to focus on. Let me click it up here. The number used to be 43. Within the last week, it's gone up to 52 million Americans are automatically going to get a ballot, whether they ask for it or not. They moved away, dead, doesn't matter. They're going to get the ballot. 52 million. 44 million Americans are getting absentee ballot applications without asking for them. So let's see, that's 52, 44. 96 million Americans are going to be getting ballots or absentee ballot applications. Obviously, that's an opportunity for fraud of enormous proportions, especially when you combine that with ballot harvesting in states like California and the lack of security measures in mail-in balloting, the dirty voting rolls that Judicial Watch has uncovered, and not only in California, but elsewhere in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, we found nearly 2 million extra names on the rolls, just in those two states alone. And of course, the left is still trying to undermine election security. In Rhode Island, they had absentee ballot requirements, I think, that required the signature of 2 witnesses. Well, the left undid that, and the Supreme Court let it go by. So now it will be easier to steal votes and steal elections in Rhode Island. And now the post office is admitting what I've been telling you, that their mails aren't reliable and they can't be sure that they'll get the ballots into the polling place in time. Now, the response of the left is to pretend, oh, we have to give the post office more money to make sure it happens. It ain't going to happen. They can have all the money in the world. They can't certify that your ballots will get to the polling place on time. They can't certify your ballots will get there at all. And certainly if you hand them to ballot harvesters, that would be a misjudgment on your part, frankly. I mean, some states allow them to, if it's, you want to give something to your husband to deliver, a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, that's appropriate, a close family member or something like that. Giving your ballot to a stranger to deliver on your behalf, like they are able to do in California, huh. So I suspect chaos on election day and beyond. It's not going to be election day. It's going to be election months. As I said, it can go into the Congress if it's not figured out. As I talked to you about, I think I talked to you about, there was this left-wing planning project. They were war-gaming out these scenarios about post-election fights. And of course, they had this, these ridiculous ideas about what President Trump was going to do, his take over the country with the military, which is just absurd. But the leftist war game, the Biden war game, run by top Democratic operative John Podesta, they're talking about having states threaten to secede from the Union in order to get Biden installed as president. That's what they were willing to do in their war games. The left was. And they talk about it being a street fight, and we can't rely on the norms, meaning the rule of law. It's a dangerous time because of the threats of the left currently in the cities where you have the threats of violence and the willingness of the left to upend the rule of law if the election result is seemingly what they don't want. And Judicial Watch has been analyzing this and seeing what legal steps we can take. Obviously, we're already in court trying to clean up the rolls. Justice Department is completely AWOL on all of this. I mean, Attorney General Barr gets it. He was on Hannity And he talked about California. He said he had friends from, I guess, who used to live in California, hadn't lived there in 21 years getting ballots. Now, supposedly the ballots aren't going to be mailed to, quote, inactive voters. But the point is, if you've got 1.5 million inactive voters in LA County alone, that suggests the other part of the list is dirty too, don't you think? The president is understating the threat to free and fair elections caused by swamping the mails with nearly 100 million ballots and ballot applications that no one's asked for. So you'll have increased voter fraud for sure. You'll have ballot harvesting with increased voter intimidation for sure. And you're going to have ballots thrown out. In 2016, 319,000 absentee mail ballots were thrown out. We don't have any way of guessing how many would be thrown out this time around because there's no precedent for what's being planned here, which is to break the system. The system is going to break. And we really appreciate the president's shout out for our work. And the fact that we're virtually the only ones doing anything on this tells you everything you need to know. Now, the Republicans are suing, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, to try to stop illegal changes. But remember, Republicans have they've got to encourage people to vote by mail too. They're not going to cede that to just the other political party. So that's why you need an independent group like Judicial Watch saying the best way to make sure your vote is counted is to vote in person. Voting by mail is a bad public policy. Absentee ballots without really having a strong basis to use them is a bad policy. Unsecured absentee ballots is a bad policy. So Republicans have to say they may not like them, but they have to encourage voters who'd like to vote by the mail to use it anyway. And of course, many of these states have no voter ID. California doesn't have voter ID. 15 big states don't have voter ID, as I've told you before. Only 10 or 11 states have strict voter ID laws, and the rest of the states have voter ID laws, but they're not as strict as they could be. So it's going to be a mess. But Judicial Watch is doing, again, the heavy lifting to try to make sure your votes are counted and the elections are as clean as possible. Corruption issues aren't just here in Washington, D.C. And of course, one of the big issues out there is the crazed attack of the war on the police, where you have these radical communist revolutionaries trying to kill police officers in in Portland. And you have politicians of the left coddling, protecting, and condoning, and in many ways encouraging this violent attack on the police. You got this defund the police move, which isn't about saving taxpayer money and gaining efficiencies. It's about defanging and destroying the police in terms of their ability to protect themselves and you and the rule of law. Now, there was a big issue out in Virginia, which is in Prince William County, which is a little bit west of Washington, D.C. And we filed a lawsuit against, and we filed it this week, against members of the Prince William County Board of Supervisors regarding a violation of Virginia's open meetings law. What had happened is that on Saturday night, May 30th, various protests and rioting occurred in Prince William County. I mean, you think these protests are only happening in the big cities? No, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. No town is safe from the violent communist revolution. It resulted in numerous injuries to police officers and extensive property damage, like a lot of these other riots have. Police officers reportedly used tear gas and pepper spray and rubber bullets to disperse the crowd, as in my view was appropriate. The next day, a meeting of the police department Citizens Advisory Board was held. All 5 Democratic supervisors attended the meeting, but the board's 3 Republican members were not notified of the meeting and did not attend. And the individual who chairs the advisory board happens to be the husband of one of the Democrat supervisors. How do you like them apples? They violated the Freedom of Information Act, which requires these open meetings, and holding a meeting in secret without notice to any of the Republicans. Or those citizens out there who might have an interest in how their government is operating and what the police should do when faced with violent rioters. What is the law? The law prohibits the gathering of 2 or more members of the same public body if any public business is transacted or discussed. While no votes were cast, the Democrat members posed questions and provided directives to the police to curtail the use of crowd control measures in future demonstrations, or future disturbances, as I would more appropriately put it. So we're glad to do this local lawsuit in Prince William County. And I know this is an issue that many of you have run into, especially if you're active in your local community. And honest politicians at the local level are very much aware of these open records laws and these open meetings laws. And that's why they're very careful about, any business of the government they do in an open meeting. And this is particularly disturbing because people's lives are on the line. And you have these leftist Democrats directing the police in a way that would, to change policy in a way that would probably increase property damage and injury and potential loss of life. So in Virginia, these cases tend to move quickly. So I should have a result for you, hopefully soon. Hopefully it's a positive result. We never know if we're going to win. We don't always win these lawsuits. I told you about the Schiff lawsuit. We were trying to get Adam Schiff's secret subpoenas of American citizens. Did you know that he can do secret subpoenas of American citizens? And he doesn't want to be able to be forced by any court to turn them over to anybody? But we lost that initially in that fight. But the point is, we're engaged in the battle. And going to court is important, not only because we're trying to pursue on behalf of ourselves, or in this case, on behalf of citizens, an important point. People have been damaged. The rule of law needs to be upheld. But we're educating people by suing. We're educating them. These lawsuits are educational. They're good law in the sense that they're pursuing something that needs to be pursued in the court, and the icing on the cake is they're educational. That's why the left hates Judicial Watch. Because they know what we do is effective because people pay attention to the lawsuits. They understand the issues that we're pursuing in the lawsuits. And we expose the corruption of big government, unaccountable government, and often socialist government. So I'll keep you updated on that. First up is the big news of the week. I think the most significant development, which is the filing of a criminal information complaint or criminal information document concerning Kevin Kleinsmith, who is a former attorney. I think he's a former attorney at the FBI, who criminally altered a document, and evidently he's going to be pleading guilty. As I suggested to you last week, or in the last some prior updates, I've been talking about this repeatedly, is that the Kleinsmith prosecution was not unexpected by Mr. Durham. He was referred to the Justice Department for prosecution by the Inspector General. So this is what happened. Remember, there were 4 applications, the first application and then the renewal applications to spy on Carter Page. And in those applications, they had, at least in 2 of them, they had known that the FBI, and according to this document, that the FBI knew, the Crossfire Hurricane team knew that Carter Page was working with the CIA, that he was a source for the CIA. And they didn't tell the court that. So there were at least 2 applications where they didn't tell the court that. And then the 4th application, just before it was filed, Kevin Kleinsmith followed up with the CIA on specifics about this issue because Carter Page went public with the fact he worked for the CIA. So you can imagine they all went crazy over there at the FBI, the anti-Trump gang there at the FBI and the Mueller operation. And so the CIA, according to this document that's been filed, sent a note back saying, yeah, he's an operational contact, and we already sent you a memo on this, and they reconfirmed it. Well, what Kleinsmith did is he forwarded it to his colleague who was setting up the application and added the words, he's not a CIA source, which is a crime. It's a false statement crime, according to Durham, and he's going to plead guilty to it. He could face up to 5 years in jail, potentially. So it's a big deal in the sense that we have the first confirmation that a crime was committed in Obamagate, a federal crime. There was a crime committed in order to spy on Donald Trump. And I know it's Carter Page, the FISA warrant, but it was about getting Donald Trump. Now, this Kevin Kleinsmith was an anti-Trumper. He talks about being part of the resistance, Viva la Resistance, in one of his text messages that was withheld from the American people for years, and Congress too. So this prosecution by Durham is overdue. It's obviously necessary, but as you might imagine, I don't think it's sufficient. So the big question is, will there be follow-up? Already the liberal media is spinning this as, well, this is just this one guy who did something wrong. It's not part of an anti-Trump conspiracy. I look at this, and of course, we all know what else happened. So that's just telling us to forget, drop all that into the memory hole. We all know that there were others involved in this misconduct. It goes all the way to the top, Barack Obama. Joe Biden was in on one of the meetings in the Oval Office, that key meeting. And the question is, are there going to be additional prosecutions? When I looked at the filing, it was kind of narrowly drawn. The one key paragraph I talked about references the, let me get it here on my phone if I can bring it up, that the Crossfire Hurricane team also knew and withheld material information from the courts. Of course, the FISA court hasn't done anything about it. They've yelled about it, but they haven't held anyone in contempt or sought criminal contempt proceedings that the court is able to do. So we don't know what else is going to happen. But the Kleinsmith prosecution or plea agreement is no surprise. I've been convinced that was going to be the case. And I've seen, again, no evidence that anyone senior in the Obama gang or the deep state operation against President Trump is going to be prosecuted. Certainly there's nothing here suggesting that they're going to be prosecuted. So this is good news for justice. And, and putting and I don't want to underplay it. I also don't want to overplay it, but not underplaying means it shows you that there was a crime committed in targeting Trump. So the question I have is, what other crimes were committed? And I think we should presume every prosecution related to Trump was tainted by this bias, by this criminal activity. You should presume that. And if you presume that, what do? Obviously, you do criminal investigations and you question everyone, and you don't let some people be immune from questioning, like Barr is letting Mr. Obama and Vice President Biden be immune from questioning. But if you're the president, maybe you pardon everyone. Pardon everyone caught up in the Mueller by the Mueller prosecutions and the subsequent prosecutions. Even folks who may have done something wrong, because I don't know, who knows what was done in terms of the misconduct. I don't have any confidence in the fair administration of justice when it comes to targeting anyone in Trump world. And I think nor can the president. And if that's the case, everyone should be pardoned. I mean, we had this week this big hearing, this en banc hearing, which is when the full circuit Court of Appeals sat and heard General Flynn's mandamus petition, which is an extraordinary remedy, as I'll talk about later, to overturn the judicial adventurism against him by Judge Sullivan. I mean, it's pretty clear the judges are going to let Judge Sullivan do more victimization of General Flynn. I don't know how much more. I mean, some of those judges on that court, I've listened to appellate decision. As a non-lawyer, I've probably been in more appellate arguments or sat through them than pretty much any layperson out there. Yeah, certainly here in Washington D.C., other than reporters who cover this for a living. And I've never heard judges as impolite, aggressive, political as I heard in that argument. Sidney Powell did a good job. The lawyer for the government, Mr. Wall, did a good job because they said that Judge Sullivan has no business doing this as well. Now, in the end, Judge Sullivan may get pushed back, but I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't take any solace if I were General Flynn for the way that hearing went. And this is why the president should pardon General Flynn. And I know some of you say, oh, no, he should be exonerated. Well, he's never really going to be exonerated. I mean, the case may be dismissed. Do you think the Obama gang is going to stop going after him? Stop harassing him? And what other victimization will Judge Sullivan or any other court put him through? He should be pardoned. And he should not only be pardoned not for him personally, which is obviously important because of the miscarriage of justice against him and the abuse of a government authority against him. But remember, the targeting of General Flynn was about targeting the targeting of General Flynn was about targeting President Trump. So this was an attack on the presidency, the attack on the ability of the president to conduct foreign policy, which is one of his core constitutional powers. I mean, when you look at the courts talk about the presidential powers and how important it is, how important they are, and how much they should be respected, they say the presidential powers, and I'm probably misquoting it, but they say that they're at apex when it comes to foreign policy. That's how much deference the president has, and that's how much important, constitutionally speaking, the president's role is. And this gang, this Obama, this president, this Comey, they targeted that core constitutional function. And that's why I call it a malicious, seditious conspiracy, and that's why I think the president should pardon him. And certainly this criminal development. Remember, Obamagate is now officially a crime. We had an FBI lawyer who was instrumental in the spying, the illicit spying on the President of the United States and his team, admit to committing a crime to get it done. And frankly, there are a whole lot of others who probably knew about it as well, but I don't know if they're going to be prosecuted or not. As I said, I'm not confident. So what can we expect next? I don't know. Attorney General Barr has made it clear that just because it looks bad doesn't mean it's a crime, which is true technically. But if you're not investigating and questioning witnesses, I don't know how you can figure that out one way or another. And I'm not seeing the investigation that I think ought to be pursued by Durham. Certainly the president seems to share my concerns. He's concerned they'll go after the low-hanging fruit and let the upper-level people get away with it. Certainly there's precedent for that sort of miscarriage of justice. And he said the president, that Barr can either be, the greatest attorney general in history or an average guy. And the implication being, if he doesn't pursue justice adequately against those truly responsible at the top levels at the FBI, Justice Department, and Obama administration, that he will have caved. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, Judicial Watch will continue its litigation. And this is what I love about Judicial Watch. We appreciate the Justice Department needs to do its job. And one of the reasons it's doing anything is because of Judicial Watch's pressure. Because we make it more difficult for them to avoid doing their job. Not that they're incapable of doing it, but at least it's tougher for them to do it. We're getting documents that Congress doesn't get that otherwise would be hidden. And Judicial Watch is continuing to get documents. And so who needs an IG when you have Judicial Watch? And so those of you who support Judicial Watch, I think you can take credit for this prosecution, because I don't think it would have happened but for our diligence. And, to be fair, the diligence of others who have been highlighting this issue from the get-go. But I dare say it, that Judicial Watch was first in highlighting the corruption behind the targeting of Mueller, the targeting of Trump. And it's resulted ultimately in this prosecution. And I thank U.S. Attorney Durham for getting it done. I thank Attorney General Barr for getting it done. But I hope this is just the beginning, because if it's not, there'll be no justice. Speaking of no justice, we had some bad news out of the Circuit Court today. The U.S. Court of Appeals granted Hillary Clinton's mandamus and is now preventing their order prevents her from being deposed by Judicial Watch in person. So now she doesn't have to testify under oath and in person to Judicial Watch as ordered by federal court about her emails and Benghazi attack records. Now, you may recall, I thought things would not go well after the appellate court hearing. The judges were very skeptical of this issue. And, I went through the decision. We're obviously disappointed. Our lawyers are analyzing the decision and trying to figure out what our options are and what should we do next. Obviously, the options are, A, we can do nothing. We can appeal to the full back panel, the full circuit, which would be an en banc panel, or we could go straight potentially to the Supreme Court. So I'm not sure what, if anything, we're going to do. But I do know this decision seems political. Hillary Clinton is getting special treatment from the court. The judge who wrote the case wanted to protect Judge Sullivan from a mandamus petition by General Flynn, but is giving Hillary Clinton unprecedented protection, along with two other judges, to be fair, from being questioned in discovery. And let's go back to what went on here. She conducted all of her government business on a private email system that was hidden from the American people, hidden from Judicial Watch, hidden from the court. State Department knew what was going on. She's the head of the agency. So as the head of the agency, she knew what was going on. And if she knows what's going on, that means the agency knows what's going on. And rather than tell us about it when we do a FOIA request and lawsuit about it, in this case tied to Benghazi, they don't tell us about it and try to get us to shut the court case down and try to get the court to shut it down. And needless to say, the court's upset. He wants to know why he was being gamed. And she takes her emails, steals them in my view, deletes half of them, otherwise hides them. And we're all supposed to be happy with that. As Judge Sullivan said, the reason we're here is because of Mrs. Clinton. That one government employee, I think the language was he used. And to see this appellate court give her, once again, special treatment is just beyond the pale. It undermines confidence in the judiciary, the fair administration of justice. I mean, compare and contrast the agony I described with the appellate court, the full court, being hesitant to grant a mandamus against General Flynn, who, in unprecedented fashion, is having a motion to dismiss his criminal charges denied. Never happened before in American history, practically speaking. And in this case, Hillary Clinton there's a simple deposition issue. And the court has essentially ruled she has an indisputable right to the relief she got. Indisputable. For me to describe it shows you how difficult it is and how extraordinary that type of relief is. So it's terribly disappointing. I mean, I guess it's not surprising, but it's still disappointing because, I don't know about you, I think the judges still need to do the right thing even when it's hard. And so when I see judges do the wrong thing, it's disappointing. I know that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, but it's still not acceptable. And what's equally, if not more outrageous, is to see the obstruction and efforts by the State Department and the Justice Department under the Trump administration being used against us. Throughout this decision, they say the State Department did this, and they were fighting us tooth and nail. And all those arguments that they were throwing out at us, and sometimes getting the courts to agree with, were used against us to stop Hillary Clinton's testimony. Tell you what, President Trump should ask Secretary Pompeo and Attorney General Barr what the heck they're doing that they were protecting Hillary Clinton like this. To me, it's a terrible betrayal of those who thought that President Trump's appointees would be doing the right thing here, because they haven't. I generally like Attorney General Barr, but on this, he's been AWOL. Secretary Pompeo, they've known about these gamesmanship that his agencies played. They're still defending her. To this day, Justice Department attorneys are colluding with Hillary Clinton's attorneys. To this day. Now, I know it's probably frustrating to you, and it's probably not surprising to you that she won't testify, at least as of now. And you think, well, now, it's frustrating she hasn't been held accountable. First of all, the statute of limitations hasn't passed. So I think you should let the White House know what you think about that. Let the Attorney General know what you think about that. Why aren't they prosecuting her over this? It was obviously the last time they looked at this issue, it was corrupted. The same gang that's now been implicated in crimes today, they were looking at Hillary Clinton. And of course, she's not president of the United States, and it's because of this email scandal. We didn't do it to make sure she wasn't president, but the consequence of our uncovering it is that she isn't president. So there's been rough justice. But specifically here, there was a miscarriage of justice. So I'll let you know what we do on this case as time progresses, but I don't know how much time we have to figure out whether we're going to appeal it or how we're going to appeal it, but we're analyzing it carefully. The rest of Washington sleeps in terms of government corruption investigations. Judicial Watch continues with the heavy lifting. We just released, the sworn written answers of Susan Rice to Judicial Watch interrogatories. We got them last year, and I've talked to them about them a little bit, but we kind of organized it and put it out there so everyone can access to it. Susan Rice was a national security advisor for President Obama, involved in the spying on Trump, obviously. Was involved in the unmasking. She was an unmasked Flynn. She also wrote the CYA memo weeks after the fact, just before Trump came into office. The memo about that infamous Oval Office meeting with Barack Obama, Joe Biden, her, and Comey and Sally Yates, where they talked about the dossier and going after Flynn. I mean, if you want to know about Susan Rice's ethics, ask yourself if your boss came and said, "Hey, you know what? Look, our whole team is being turned out of corporate headquarters here. And I was thinking about that meeting we had a few weeks ago. I think we need to memorialize that. You know what I mean? Why don't you go ahead and memorialize that? And by the way, we need to get that done before I get kicked out noon today." Now, did Obama say that to Susan Rice? I don't know. But that's essentially what happened. Susan Rice wrote this memo minutes before the president was sworn in. President Trump was sworn in. The by the book memo, remember that? But also she was the U.S., and before she became national security advisor, it looks to me like she proved her worth by lying 5 times to the American people on the Sunday morning talk shows in the months before President Obama's reelection about Benghazi. Remember, she blamed the video and spontaneous demonstrations rather than the terrorist attack in Al-Qaeda, even though they knew otherwise. Remember, she lied about Benghazi. Well, we had asked for records about Benghazi and found that the so-called talking points she had said were based on intelligence community assessments were actually based on the political assessment of Ben Rhodes, one of the political hacks working in the Obama White House, who wrote the talking points, and they were completely political. I've looked at every piece of document, I think it's fair to say, that's been produced about the Benghazi attack and who knew what and when. There's no evidence the intelligence community concluded that the attack was the result of a spontaneous demonstration that got out of control in response to an internet video that no one had seen. There's no evidence that was the case. There was evidence they knew immediately it was a coordinated attack. There was evidence they knew even before the attack that something was coming down the pike. Yet Susan Rice went and lied for Hillary Clinton and for Barack Obama. Why? Because there was an election coming up, and President Obama was running on the fact that, and this is Joe Biden's famous, I remember Joe Biden saying this, and I don't know if he was the only one who said it, Bin Laden is dead and GM is alive. Not a bad slogan, right? They killed Bin Laden and GM was alive. You know, there's a big controversy about the federal bailout of the car companies, and they were taking credit for the bailout. But if Bin Laden killed a U.S. ambassador and 3 other innocents in an attack never seen before in recent American history, the last U.S. ambassador killed in the line of duty like that was I think our ambassador of Afghanistan during the Carter administration. So they had all this incentive to lie, which they did. So Judicial Watch exposed the talking points, and that circle of litigation that exposed the Clinton emails, because we noticed there were no Clinton emails. We said, where are the Clinton emails? And we pushed and we pushed. The government finally responded, we gave you everything other than these other documents. Turns out the other documents were the Clinton emails. We forced their release. So long story short, as a result of that, a federal court judge authorized us to get discovery. Discovery meaning evidence gathering. Now, you may know right now that we're waiting to question Hillary Clinton because he authorized the release of the deposition in person of Hillary Clinton. And she's desperately appealed that. It's on appeal right now. We're waiting for the decision. It's a mandamus petition. She and her chief of staff, Cheryl Mills. But as part of that discovery, we're allowed to question in writing, send interrogatories, Susan Rice. So I thought it was important that we get this information out to the American people, because Susan Rice has been in the news a lot recently. Plus, we've had this information and we wanted to get it out. And you'll be surprised to learn, or maybe not surprised to learn, Susan Rice can't remember much. 18 times she said, I don't recall. She said she does not recall who gave her the key Benghazi talking points that I told you about. They came from the White House, not the intelligence community. Does not recall being in any meetings regarding Benghazi in the days following the attack. Isn't that amazing? No meetings, she can't remember. And does not recall communicating with anyone in Clinton's office about the Benghazi talking points. So does that mean it did or didn't happen? It's not clear. She did admit that she did send emails on Hillary Clinton, to Hillary Clinton on her non-governmental email system. So she knew. Susan Rice knew. And she herself used private emails to conduct government business. Specifically, when asked to describe meetings or discussions about the events in Benghazi, other than the daily intelligence briefings, Rice said she had discussions with friends and family and does not recall attending any meetings focused on the events in Benghazi between September 11th and September 16th, 2012, other than attending a ceremony of September 4th, 2012 at Joint Base Andrews. Rice said she believes she would have discussed the Benghazi attack with members of the UN staff, colleagues of the United Nations, and individuals in attendance at the ceremony on September 14th, 2012 at Joint Base Andrews. So she can't remember any meetings about Benghazi despite being our ambassador to the United Nations. She did not directly answer a question about deleting emails. Rather, Rice answered that when emails related to U.S. government business were sent to her personal email account, she took steps to ensure that a copy of that email was also on her government email account. and she does not recall having need to review and return emails from any government email account, non-governmental email account. So who knows what she was doing, according to her own written testimony. Now, I know Joe Biden is considering her and some others for vice president. Now, the question I have is there going to be accountability on Benghazi about the email issue? My question for the Justice Department is, why haven't they investigated Clinton's emails after they found out, I'm pretending here, bear with me, that the Clinton email investigation was completely corrupted by the Comey FBI? Why haven't they reinitiated an investigation? Why haven't they done an audit? General Barr should do what he did with the Flynn investigation, where he assigned a U.S. There are lots of things he should do, but here's one thing he can do. In the least, he should assign a U.S. attorney, like he did with General Flynn, to review the Clinton case and do an audit to see if those prosecutorial non-decisions were appropriate. Did the FBI do what they should have done? Of course they didn't. That's why they don't want to do the review I'm talking about. Did the DOJ make the right decision? Of course they didn't. It was corrupted. We all knew it was rigged. Remember the tarmac meeting. I go through all of this, by the way, in our new book. So maybe the DOJ can read the new book. You know, I sent out a tweet today, and I just started off I wrote Sessions, Huber, Barr, Durham, all in one word, just one long word. That's my perception. Nothing's changed. And if I really wanted to be mean, I would have put Holder, Lynch, Sessions, Huber, Barr, Durham, one long word. From Judicial Watch's perspective, there hasn't been much difference. Now, I know in terms of policy, the DOJ has done there have been significant changes in policy. That's for sure. But in terms of transparency and accountability, same old, same old. What's the difference between Attorney General Barr and General Sessions? There isn't that much. Rhetorically, obviously, Attorney General Barr is much more effective in terms of communicating and defending the presidency and the Constitution against the assaults it's undertaking. It's going through right now, and went through with Russiagate. But in terms of prosecutions, no difference. Although I do think, to be fair, I think the big difference would be I don't think Sessions would have been able to undo the Flynn investigation the way that Barr did. Certainly Rod Rosenstein wouldn't do what Barr did in terms of ending that corrupt prosecution. So we'll see what happens. Because we've got a campaign going on, there's all these efforts to kind of scare Barr from doing the right thing. He should do the right thing on Obama, on Clinton, and vindicate President Trump. Because President Trump is a crime victim. General Flynn is a crime victim. He needs also to be investigating the Mueller investigation, which is part of the criminal conspiracy against General Flynn in the least. And it's not stopping for President Trump. The coup is continuing. There's decisions this week in court. The House is now still pushing to get Don McGahn, the president's former White House counsel, to testify. That was an impeachment inquiry. There's this New York-based district attorney, the DA in New York, Cyrus Vance Jr., harassing the president by going after his tax returns. Where'd that investigation come from? It came from Mueller. Initially, they handed it off to the anti-Trumpers in the Southern District of New York, who then kicked it over to the New York district attorney in the city there in Manhattan. You saw the harassment of President Trump by the Attorney General of New York. Now the Attorney General of New York, who's a radical leftist who ran made political statements when she was running how she was going to target Trump, the NRA. Now she wants to dissolve the NRA. Dissolve it. 3 months before the election, she announces this press conference that the leadership of the NRA are terrible people. Therefore, the whole organization needs to be dissolved. The left is playing for keeps. Those of us who are defending the rule of law it's just Judicial Watch. It's really just Judicial Watch. And the president's got lawyers trying to protect him here and there. So the crisis continues, but you can be sure that Judicial Watch will continue. We're, as I said, seeking information, seeking testimony about Hillary Clinton or from her. We'll see what the court rules there finally. But we're still doing it. We're still doing it. People say, well, what? It's so long. Well, it hasn't been that long. The statute of limitations isn't run out. And plus, we still have a right to the documents. According to the law, it hasn't been long enough. But of course, the law doesn't apply to Hillary Clinton, right? Not as best witness, but not if there's anything we can do about it.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.